It started with a glance, an innocent, fleeting moment, or at least that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something I'd never be able to undo. My name doesn't matter, not really. What matters is the story I'm about to share, a story that will haunt me forever. The first time I met him, my stepson, I barely noticed him. He was just a quiet young man, polite but distant, standing awkwardly at the edge of my wedding to his father. He seemed lost, like he didn't belong there, like he wasn't ready to accept me. I didn't blame him. Marrying someone with a grown child was bound to be complicated, and I was determined to tread carefully, to earn his trust. But earning his trust wasn't what happened. It began innocently enough. My husband traveled a lot for work, leaving me and my stepson alone in the house. At first, it was just small talk, casual conversations about his studies, his hobbies, his life. He was intelligent and well-spoken, with a sharp wit that caught me off guard more than once. I started looking forward to our conversations, to the sound of his voice filling the otherwise empty house. It felt harmless. It wasn't. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, he joined me in the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, watching me with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. "You're too good for my dad, you know that?" he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I laughed nervously, brushing off the comment, but the way he looked at me, it was like he wasn't joking. It was unsettling, and yet, there was something intoxicating about it. For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my mind over and over again. Was he serious? Was it just a harmless compliment? And why did it make my heart race the way it did? I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew better. The tension between us grew with each passing day. It was in the way he looked at me, the way his fingers would brush mine when he handed me something, the way he lingered just a little too long when we were alone. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But pretending only works for so long. One rainy afternoon, we were watching a movie together in the living room. My husband was out of town again, and the storm outside had knocked out the power, leaving us in darkness except for the flickering candlelight. As the rain pounded against the windows, I felt his gaze on me, heavy and intense. "You're beautiful," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. My heart stopped. I turned to him, my breath caught in my throat. There was no mistaking the look in his eyes. It wasn't the look of a son admiring his stepmother. It was something else entirely. "This is wrong," I whispered, more to myself than to him. But even as I said it, I felt myself leaning closer, drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. It was as if some invisible force was pulling us together, a force neither of us could resist. The first time it happened, I was consumed with guilt. I told myself it was a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of an affair that would change everything. We were careful, or at least we tried to be. We avoided each other when my husband was home, kept our interactions brief and distant. But when we were alone, it was impossible to stay away from each other. The chemistry between us was electric, undeniable. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, and I was addicted. But secrets have a way of unraveling, no matter how carefully they're kept. One evening, my husband came home earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen, and my stepson was leaning against the counter, too close, his hand brushing mine. We both froze as we heard the front door open. The look in his eyes was a mix of fear and defiance, and for a moment, I thought he might say something, do something that would expose us. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped back, putting a safe distance between us just as my husband walked into the room. The guilt was suffocating, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Every time I tried to end it, to tell him we couldn't do this anymore, He'd look at me with those piercing blue eyes, and all my resolve would crumble. "You deserve to be happy," he told me one night, his voice filled with conviction. "And you're not happy with him. You're just going through the motions." He wasn't wrong. My marriage had been more about convenience than love, a way to escape the loneliness that had consumed me after my divorce. But admitting that didn't make what I was doing any less wrong. The day everything fell apart was a day like any other. My husband had gone to work and I was home alone, or so I thought. My stepson and I were in the living room, caught in a moment of weakness, when the front door opened. My husband stood there, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal as he took in the scene before him. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, but no words came out. The look on his face, a mix of heartbreak and rage, was more than I could bear. He turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. In the days that followed, the fallout was devastating. My husband filed for divorce, cutting me out of his life completely. My stepson moved out, disappearing without a word. I was left alone, drowning in a sea of guilt and regret. To this day, I don't know why I did it. Was it the thrill of doing something forbidden? The need to feel desired? Or was it something deeper? Something I'm too afraid to confront? All I know is that I destroyed everything I cared about for a love that was never meant to be. And now, as I sit here, alone with my thoughts, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it?